Five biggest mistakes that we see when business owners and operators are evaluating a lease is number one being not fully understanding the true cost of the lease. And so there are really three types of leases that you'll be evaluating. A triple net lease, which means that all of the CAM fees, so common area maintenance fees, all of the utilities, all of the property taxes, potentially capital expenditures on the property if the parking lot needs to be resurfaced. In a triple net lease, all of that is going to fall back on the tenant of that building versus the landlord. And so that's a huge one when you're looking at, all right, price per square foot looks low, it's great. You may see 2 to 3 times that in terms of additional fees and things that are going to pop up that you may not be prepared for. And so really understanding that aspect of a triple net lease, what have previous property taxes been, what maintenance is in the building, really inspecting that up front to understand, is there a roof leak? Has it leaked in the past? What am I going to need to pay in terms of Wi-Fi, utilities, electricity bills, landscaping, security? All of these things are going to come and fall on your plate. And so understanding that true cost of the overall lease is really, really important in a triple net environment. Another version of a lease is a modified gross lease. And so this kind of falls in between where some of the common area maintenance aspects are going to be taken care of on the landlord and other things may not. And so a modified gross lease is really all about negotiating that and understanding what is in and what's out and making sure that that is fully understood in terms of ownership of specific costs. And if you can do that, then take the same steps in a triple net, understand the ones that are going to be on your plate, see what past bills have been, see what history looks like, and really understand those factors going in. The third type is a gross lease. And so a gross lease is where you're getting a flat rate for the space, the utilities, the maintenance, everything's included in that. And so a gross lease is really a key factor if you want to have a very consistent budget, a very consistent fee, and no surprises. So you can kind of think of a gross lease as an all-inclusive lease. Everything that you need is going to be there and is going to be taken care of in that monthly rate. And so those are the three types, and really understanding the cost behind those are really, really important. The second one is your exit strategy. So in these leases, depending on what they are, how many years are you signing for? And depending on that path, what exit opportunities do you have? So is there a clause that allows you to terminate the lease with a certain amount of notice? It probably will come with a fee, but if you do need to move, you would have that as a component to actually get out of that lease. Another clause might be subleasing. So if you have outgrown that space, but you're still in that lease for another 3 years, do you have the opportunity to sublease that space so that you can get out of it, it's being covered by the new tenant, and you can move on to your next venture? The other aspect would be right of first refusal or right of first offer, where in the same building or same area that you're leasing in currently, if a larger space or smaller space comes available, do you have that opportunity to move into one of those spaces depending on if you're trying to scale or downsize? So those are some of the key things on the exit strategy where we see a lot of people get locked into space that they've either outgrown or no longer need and have to hold on to that lease. And so those are some key things on the exit strategy to really make sure you understand those variables. And if you are getting locked in long term, is this really going to suit your needs for the length of that lease? So those are some of the key things on the exit strategy. The other big one is zoning and use of space. So you're coming into this space, you're looking at, this looks great for this and that, and location's awesome, but can you do all the things that you need to do today and potentially the things that you're thinking about for the future? And so zoning is a huge aspect here where your zoning might not allow you to manufacture in that space. Your zoning might not allow you to take cash or receive funds for services on site. There are so many zoning components when you're comparing retail versus industrial versus multi-use. And so truly getting that up front to make sure that before you get into that lease, you can do the things that you're doing today and the things you plan to do in the future are critically important. And that's from a general, the county, the township, whatever is going to set that zoning. The other aspect is use in the actual lease agreement. So what can you do in this space? And if that doesn't match what you're planning on, what you're doing today, those are key things to make sure that you're truly evaluating on that front as well. The fourth would be overlooking that growth aspect. And so we kind of touched on this in terms of the length of the lease and some of those exit clauses. But when you're thinking about the growth, how much do you need today moving in, and will that support your business over the next 5, 6, 7 years if it's not a flexible lease? If it is a flexible lease, then do you have the opportunity to add on and upgrade at any time? And so really understanding your growth goals and the opportunities that if you need to expand or you need to right size or downsize, do you have that flexibility? So knowing what you're going to grow into, really looking at what do I need today, and if it's 2-year, 3-year, whatever the length of that term is, will this support me if I don't have the opportunity to move? Because if you need to grow, then that's going to be costly because you might have operations in 2 different sites and you're trying to expand. It's going to have a huge drain on your productivity and your ability to grow and scale on that front. And then finally, the condition of the building. When we talked about the triple net and some of the maintenance and even in a modified gross, what are the things that you need to do in that space? Does it already need repairs? If you're planning on a build out, is there a opportunity or an allowance for build out from that landlord? In some cases, you'll have that where they're going to give you X amount of dollars to actually build out the space. Is that going to cover it? Is it enough? What are the additional things that you'll need to do to adjust that space? What does the inspection say? What are the key things that you see around? Is it actually going to be feasible to be in here? So really understanding that if those are going to fall on your plate, what is the true cost of a build out, or what are the anticipated costs that are going to fall on your plate in the future for maintenance, upkeep, and updates, because those are some other things that folks don't necessarily look at initially, and then you're stuck waiting to build out your space. It's not the feeling that you need. It's not the brand presence that you need, and you're ashamed to bring a customer there. That's the worst case scenario. So really making sure that those things are aligned on all of those fronts. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of opportunities to negotiate in terms of what is your budget, what are the additional costs, what's the landlord going to cover, and a lot of the clauses that you can either make sure are in there or remove in terms of getting that done. So pricing, is always something that is, potentially up for negotiation. Oftentimes the length of a term is something that can give you some flexibility there. The other aspect is, what am I going to need to do with this space? So can I get that allowance? Can I get some money to build this space out? Do I need to build the space out? Is it already the perfect box that I need or the perfect space that I need? So negotiating the things that you're going to need. No agreement is ever set in stone, and so there's so many variables, but I think the big ones are, what's my price? What are the all-in costs, and are there any of those costs that I can pass on to the landlord? What do I need to have from an out clause or exit strategy to make sure that if I do need to move, those things are covered in this agreement and that I have that flexibility, as well as then any additional liability pieces. So if somebody's asking you to personally guarantee a space, that might be an issue. That becomes, if you can't sustain the business, that's a liability on the person. So some of those negotiations can be in there to either remove those or make sure that you're comfortable covering them. And each of these is really, how do you reduce risk? So anytime that you're looking at an agreement, how can I reduce risk on the business? How do I make sure that I can have as consistent of fees and costs as possible, and that flexibility needed to either get in or out of the lease? So always look at what are the risks that I have in signing this, and what are those points that I need to negotiate. And you may not always get all of them, but push on every single one of them. It's all a discussion. Make sure that you truly understand all those variables so that you can have the best outcome for your business and reduce as much risk on the business as possible. So the hidden costs, there are a number of them. One hidden cost that if it's not reviewed and explicitly looked at is increases, so annual increases in a lease. If that's not negotiated up front, what does that look like? What amount could they push me to? That's a huge additional cost where you may be thinking, I'm signing this for multiple years, I'm going to be at this rate, and then it increases. You're like, what happened? Well, they probably had a clause in there that allowed them to increase annually. So that's one big factor when you're looking at those hidden costs. The other hidden costs really come into play when we're thinking about maintenance and upkeep. So if the ceiling's leaking, if the HVAC goes out, if plumbing breaks, all of these things become additional costs on your plate. In a landlord agreement, they probably also have stipulations of landscaping upkeep, garbage and parking lot maintenance, and all of these other things to make their property look good. But are they passing that on to you as the consumer and the tenant? Those are massive costs if there is a problem or an issue that arises. The other, especially in a triple net lease, would be the property taxes. This is one that very few people look at or truly understand in the early days when you're just getting your first lease, is that they're going to pass that on to you, and all of a sudden you're getting a huge bill at the end of the year that you may not have the cash flow or reserves to cover. That can be a massive, massive issue on additional hidden costs. And then finally, when you think about that opportunity cost, so if you're locking yourself into a lease that you are going to outgrow, that's going to be an opportunity cost for you. If you're getting space that's too big to start with and you don't scale into it, that's a cost against your business that you're not ready for. So some of those aspects of truly understanding where your business is, and am I either going to lose business because I can't grow with it, or am I going to be overpaying because I didn't scale fast enough, are other considerations when you're thinking about the hidden costs within a lease. Wow, assessing a commercial space's true value has so many components to it. I mean, I think the first one is whether or not it's turnkey, because if I'm looking at this space, there's a big difference between it's move-in ready, it's going to service my needs, and there's no additional costs, versus kind of dreaming about what that might look like. Because with construction costs and all of these elements that are out there today, build outs are a bit of a dream. And so looking at it and saying, oh, I'm going to build this out and it's going to look great. Well, guess what? When that lease is over, that investment is now value for the landlord, not value for you. And so I think that's a big initial one, is really looking at the turnkey nature of the space and does it suit my needs, versus kind of dreaming about or future vision of it, because that's a huge difference maker in terms of what is the real value today. The other piece is your brand presence. So if I'm going to bring vendors here, if I'm going to need to store customer materials here, if I need to bring a customer on site, do I have room to have this conversation? Do I have room to get with all of my employees and have a team meeting? All of those things create value for your business. And if you're looking at it from that lens, do I have the opportunity to do that? Would I be proud of this space? So those are some of the key factors on that front. And then lastly, when you're thinking about the value, is security is a huge factor. And when we're talking with landscapers, general contractors, HVAC, folks with equipment, folks with expensive materials, expensive inventory. That can't be overlooked. The number of stories we hear of folks needing to move to Rise because they were broken into, things were stolen, they lost product, you name it, all of those things really hamper your ability to do business. And so we cannot put enough of a premium on security and the value of security in a space, because it is your assets, it is real dollars, and understanding that is a critical component when you're trying to evaluate the value of a space. And then lastly is, can I grow? And when you think about growth, that is so important. Will I be able to now hire more employees? Will I be able to fulfill more orders? Can I get more folks out in the field working on jobs? Do I have that ability to build a team here that allows me to scale and grow my business? Those are some of the key questions on value. And then lastly, does the price match what I'm receiving? And I think those are some key things when you're thinking about that value assessment and what makes a property or a commercial space valuable to you as a business owner or operator.